is the co-founder of The Bear Kitchen out of the UK. And how we'll structure this, he's got some great philosophies and his journey. So he'll talk for about 10 to 15 minutes about how he came to where he is today and how he approaches sustainable cooking. And then we'll spend about 40 minutes watching him prepare and sort of give a demo on that. If you have questions along the way, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll collect the questions and we can sort of talk through as Jens, as you're cooking, if you're comfortable with that. But I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Amy, and thanks everyone for having me as part of this. I'm incredibly excited. I have sort of come up with something on a fairly short notice, so it's a little bit improvised. So please bear with me, pun intended. First, I'm gonna, like Amy said, I'll tell a little bit about myself. So I come from Denmark, where I grew up, and my sort of journey with food and the environment as well actually began quite early on in my life. When I was about 10 years old, my family moved to a new home just north of Copenhagen. And I very vividly remember the first time we went there, and I was, you know, I loved being outdoors all the time, you know, so in the first house we lived in, there was a big garden. So the only thing I wanted to see was what the garden looked like. So I ran around the house, and then our garden was really nice. There was a nice little lawn and, you know, some trees and so on. But then the next door neighbors, that wasn't actually a garden. That was like a wilderness, just like a jungle with vines and so on. I looked in there and I thought, that is very cool. And it turns out that it's an old lady who was living in there, and she hadn't really come out much in the past 50 years. So nature had just sort of done its thing on this little plot of land in the middle of suburbia. And I started playing in there every day, pretty much. I would be in there running around. And that was all well and good. I had a great time until about a year later, when I came home from school to the sound of chainsaws that were massacring this place. And I just, for the life of me, could not understand. I was really, really upset about this. And I couldn't understand why anybody would want to do that to a place of such utter beauty, you know, that I found just unbelievable and magical. And then my mom tried to explain to me that the old lady had died, and some of her relatives who had inherited the place, they just wanted a normal garden, back garden. And again, I still couldn't understand it. Why would you want a garden when you can have a rainforest, you know? And that sort of got me going. And then as I became a little bit older, I started to realize that it wasn't just my next door neighbor's jungle paradise that was being ravaged. That in fact, all over the world, human activities are causing, I don't think I need to explain that to anyone in this day and age. And then as I started sort of going more into this, I became quite frustrated as well, because what can you do about it? You know, what can you do about the Amazon rainforest being chopped down when you're sitting in Denmark? And then basically, I came to London to study, and then started getting into sustainability-driven entrepreneurship. And then I had this big love of food in the bag as well. And then I started to realize that actually our food choices are one of the main drivers of environmental destruction, you know, biodiversity loss and climate change. And that made me both very excited, and obviously, you know, also when you start to realize the scale of the problem, it's quite grim. But at the same time, very exciting, because that means that we can do something about it. And so Michael, another Danish guy, and I, we sort of met, had a serendipitous meeting of minds in London, and we really wanted to do something about the way that that food is done. And neither of us are like, we both grew up in families where we would sit down at the dinner table and eat together, you know, and nobody ever talked about healthy food, because it was kind of the default that obviously was going to be proper quality and you know, homemade and so on. And I think that there is a big sort of thing with this whole issue around healthy eating that's become much more difficult than it really has to be. So Michael and I, with a bit of inspiration from our furry friend in nature, the bear, we came up with this alternative to diet fads and dogmas and isms and so on, which is the eat like a bear philosophy, hence the apron. and the logo. So basically, bears, contrary to what most people think, eat primarily plants. A grizzly bear in Alaska will eat up to 90% plants. So when you see them eating salmon, that's actually only 1 week or so a year when the salmon come up to spawn. You know, the rest of the time is blueberries and nuts and so on. So we thought that's kind of cute, you know, eat like a bear, you know. So primarily plants and less but better quality meat. And of course, the bear doesn't eat any factory farmed animals or any highly processed foods. So it's a nice little analogy that we as human beings also can use to kind of guide our approach to eating healthier and also eating in a way that's better for the planet. For us, it's incredibly important that every meal is a healthful joy rather than a weights and measures guilt trip, you know. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with people if they do, if people want to be vegan or vegetarian or whatever they want to be, that should be respected. And I had a very interesting experience when I was studying Chinese before I came to London. I was living with an old Chinese couple there. And at that point, this was the third time I was in China. So my Chinese was good enough that I could insist on being in the kitchen with my Ai, as it's called, my Chinese auntie. And I noticed that when she would cook, you know, she would use meat, but she would use very small quantities along with other umami-giving ingredients to basically make vegetables taste very interesting. And that really made me think, like, that's very smart, you know, to kind of rethink the way we use meat, you know, because in the end, it's not about you know, a binary proposition. You either do it or you don't. You know, it's about finding a balance that works for each individual. And the important thing for us really at the Bear Kitchen is we just want people, personally as well, I just want people to understand what the implications of our choices are, you know, to be aware. And if people are aware, then they can choose to do with that awareness and knowledge what they want. So that's not my job to judge or moralize. I am just here to kind of demonstrate and inspire. So I think I'm sort of going to start to get into what I'm going to be cooking. So one of the things we realized in the Bear Kitchen is that obviously when we say reduce meat, then we have to get those proteins from somewhere else. And as almost banal, it's very simplistic almost, but pulses actually are the name of the game when it comes to where we should be getting our protein from in a sustainable or actually a regenerative and healthy way. And for those of you who maybe don't know what pulses is, they are the dried seeds of edible legumes. So chickpeas, lentils, beans, peas, and so on are all classified as pulses. And aside from being incredibly nourishing, they're also very affordable. And then they also are nitrogen fixers, meaning they put nitrogen back into the soil. Whereas when you grow wheat, for instance, it takes nitrogen out of the soil. So they're incredibly important as part of can be incredibly important as part of the so-called crop rotation. If we want to fix farming, i.e. not have crop agriculture over here and animal farming over here, but find a way to emulate the way that nature does it. The thing with pulses is they take a long time to cook. So what we do now at the Bear Kitchen, I'm not going to explain to you the whole journey. We do these meal bases here. Yes, I am pitching you, but it's genius because basically we cook locally grown pulses that we get from British farms, and then we simmer them for hours and hours and hours to taste perfection, and then you get them in a 500-gram bag that contains 100 to 120 grams of dried pulses. And if you go to this beautiful website called pulses.org, they will tell you about the one handful a day sort of mantra, you know. So if you can get about 50 grams of dried pulses a day, then you are doing your body a huge favor. So we're going to be using that. I'm going to be using this one, which is this Nordic style split peas and greens, because we're sort of coming into autumn, and it works well for what else we've got going. So that would obviously take me about 7 hours to cook that. So that's already done. So we'll get that heating up, and then if you, again, coming back to the Eat Like a Bear philosophy, you know, less but better quality meat. So what we also have here is some spelt, which I've cooked. And usually when you combine pulses with a whole grain, 100% whole grain, you complete the 9 amino acids that the body cannot itself produce. Plus, you get a lot of fiber and lots of minerals and vitamins and so on. If anybody has watched Game Changers, that's what they basically talk about, the gladiator diet, which is barley and beans. So that kind of applies to any type of grain, any type of whole grain, any type of pulse. You put them together, usually a good idea. And then obviously lots of vegetables. And seeing as it's it's autumn, we've got some cavolo nero here that I'm going to do a little stir fry with. And then I left my vegetables in the sink here because it's a really, really good trick. When you go and buy a bunch of vegetables, fill your sink with water or a big container, wash it all, because then it's done. You don't have to do it again every single time you cook, and it just makes it a lot more fun. I also found this when I was out shopping. I have no idea what it is. I think it's some kind of radish. And the reason I bought it is just to demonstrate that when you start to sort of think about cooking in terms of principles rather than recipes, so in this case, we're using the principle of stir frying to make the accompaniment for the pulses, the meal base, which forms the protein element. So I have done a little bit of prep, but I also left a little bit of it. So you kind of got to see how quickly you can actually make a nourishing home-cooked meal without that much effort, you know, and without really having, there's no recipes involved in this. I'm just making it up as I go along.
And Jens, question for you. I mean, if I may, one thing that I love about the Bare philosophy and using pulses is that it's so widely available throughout the world.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, we have a lot of people today from a lot of different areas of the globe, and just about how this can be translated to different local areas, local markets.
Well, yeah, I mean, so if we start with the UK, for instance, so fava beans have been grown in the UK since the Iron Age. And then it's kind of gone out of fashion, you know, because we've got Monsanto and the industrialization of agriculture, whereas before we had tens of thousands of types of wheat. We now have 3 primarily that are grown all over the world industrially with lots of synthetic input. And it's the same thing with pulses. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of different types, species of pulses, lentils, and so on. Many different types of lentils, different types of chickpeas, different types of beans. And there is definitely one that's suitable to grow. I mean, you can grow them pretty much anywhere. There's some, like, even in this country now, you can get, I mean, it's not a pulse, but quinoa is very interesting. They grow here now. Chickpeas. We get all of our pulses from a company called Hotmedots, which is doing great work in terms of getting farmers to help them to be able to grow pulses. But even if they are not locally available, which sometimes they aren't because for whatever reason they're not grown in your country yet, the eco footprint, the climate footprint of transporting a dried pulse via ship, say from Turkey or India or Canada, where a lot of them are grown, China, is still far lower than it would be if you compare that to eating meat, you know, and God forbid factory farm meat, just because it's you know, also not good for you and doesn't taste of anything. So I hope that does that more or less answer your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just if there's are there any other questions at this stage? Just as I get things going here.
Yeah, if you guys have a question, either just unmute or throw it in the chat. We also have quite a, oh yeah, Krister.
When is the book coming out?
What?
When is the book coming out?
When the book, that is a lovely question. Thank you very much for asking that. It is sort of in the making. So I write blogs, articles occasionally that you can find at thebarekitchen.co. And a lot of that philosophy and different, like, cooking with principles will all be part of a book at some point. So it's going to be part philosophy, you know, basically saying that, you know, changing the world by changing the way we eat is not a fringe movement. You know, it's something we should all be involved in to the extent we think is suitable for the way we live our lives. So that, yeah, it's all sort of being built at the moment. Obviously, COVID and this situation wouldn't say threw a spanner in the wheel, but has been throwing us a curveball. So a lot of these projects have been put on hold until such a time that we are on a sort of stable footing again.
I'll go ahead and add the link to the blog here. For
Yes, please do. It's under resources.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so your meal prep kits, they're available in the UK now?
Yes, they are now. They will be available through independent health shops to start with, and then we also sell them online with delivery in East London at the moment. And then eventually we're looking at sort of some more national resellers in terms of distribution is the idea. But right now we also farmers markets right now, because we really feel like there's, we don't have all the communication around it right just yet, so the personal relationship for us is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Rather than quantity right now. It's about, so we got some customers that are buying it again and again now, that are really into it and have understood, that it saves them a lot of time and it tastes good and so on. So yeah.
I can't find your Instagram account.
There is so if you put the Bear Kitchen in one word,
Yeah.
then underscore after that, there's a Swedish guy who took the other Bear Kitchen without the underscore.
Well, Jules is on it. She's got you linked here as well.
Okay, good.
Now I found. Thank you.
Good stuff. So I think we're gonna just let you see what's going on here. So always, I'm making a little salad on the side as well. So the spelt is going to become sort of like a warm salad, and then you get yourself a nice big bowl. Well, actually, for that, it's always good for salads. Nice big bowls, so you have plenty of space to touch your food. In the meantime, here we're just gonna get these. So I'm getting I'm chopping some mushrooms right now. Some shiitake mushrooms and some portobello mushrooms, and they're gonna go into my wok. Initially, I just put them in there dry, so they just it just basically sort of seals them a little bit, so you can use a little bit less oil. Plus, it also burns them a little bit. It gives them a nice flavor. In China, if they were making a stir fry, they would put the mushroom. They would first do the garlic and so on, and then they would put the mushrooms in there. I'm doing it the other way around. It's up to you. And seeing as we are sort of in Chinese territory, the trinity of a northern Chinese stir fry is leek and ginger and garlic, and then in some instances chili, if you like. So we're going to go with all four in this instance. And again, I cannot stress up, I am literally just making these things up as I go along, which I find so much more fun to cook that way for everyday purposes. Not saying that you should never use a recipe, but when it just comes to like feeding yourself and your family in a healthy, delicious way, you don't really want to be spending your time looking at recipes and planning too much. You want to kind of get on with it.
I so get that whole not following a recipe philosophy. I don't know. I've tried. I can't do it. I'm like, I just have to create on the spot. It's so fun.
Exactly. And I think it's also, sometimes when you do that, of course, sometimes it tastes better than other times, and that's fine. I think people are too scared of making mistakes in the kitchen. Some of the best innovations, the best dishes like tatatang came out of a mistake in the kitchen.
Oh, I don't even know what that is.
It's the upside down apple cake. Really, really delicious. Very easy to make. You can make it with lots of different things. I'll put the name of it in the chat here. If you haven't tried that, you should definitely.
It's French, right?
Tatin. Yes, it's from the Tatin sisters who created it. Good. So basically what's happening now over here is that we've got, whoops. So we got these mushrooms. Those sort of just put them in there and heat them up. And then the meal base, or the Nordic casserole piece here, just kind of bubbling away. So that's all happening. And then I've got my my flavor base here, now chopped and ready to go into the mushrooms. If anybody's wondering why is my chopping board burnt, it's because I don't like when my fruit tastes like onion. So the other side, which is not burnt, is for fruit, and then this side is for onion and vegetables and so on. That's a very, very nifty little trick, you know, because there's nothing worse than that yogurt and then a mango that has like a slight whiff of garlic in your breakfast. Good stuff. So basically now I'm going to start with the salad, and again, no right or wrong. I recommend, like, if you eat vegetables raw, try and slice them as thinly as possible, and then we're going to get into like the importance of touching your food, massaging it, in a sense, pre-digesting it. Then obviously being Danish, cabbage is big for me. It should be for everybody really, because cabbages are very, very nutrient dense, calorie poor, full of fiber and amazing things. And they grow here in this part of the world all year round, which makes them a very, very good idea to kind of put, and also it puts a bit of base solidity in your salads. So always I put cabbage in, yeah, 80% of what I do.
Is there a reason why your cabbage is purple? Because I think in China, in Japan, we only have it in green.
Well, I mean, it is red cabbage. I just am thinking now. I remember using quite lots in China as well. So it's the same taste, almost like white cabbage. It's just got a different color. I like it in salads. It's not so good if you stir fry it, because it's going to decolor. It's going to decolor things. And now over here, I'm going to bring this here. So now I'm going to add a bit of oil to this. A couple of tablespoons, I think, and then in goes the flavor. And now basically what's happening here is we're gonna fry those mushrooms and the flavor base, and then we're gonna add some soy sauce and some other umami giving things to it. And then that basically becomes like the stock cube, if you will, of the sauce, in which we're going to cook the rest of the ingredients for the stir fry in. Get this good. In goes cabbage. Boom, boom, boom. Also, good knives are incredibly important for good cooking. I'm religious about keeping my knives sharp. And I think really anybody who is remotely serious about doing some cooking should really be serious about knives. Just a little side note. All right, so I'm gonna bring everybody over here for a sec, because this is where the action is sort of happening now. Can we see? Yes, good. Right, so I've got this going here, and then now we're gonna start to first a little dash of, hold on. We're gonna give it some Lao Jiao, old Chinese rice cooking wine, just a little splash. It's incredibly good for mushrooms and any sort of dark flavors you've got going on. Just let that burn off. And then we're gonna give it just a few drops of vinegar as well. I'm using one of my favorite products in the whole world, Aspal's British apple balsamic vinegar. Insanely good. And then soy sauce. I like Kikkoman. Make sure you get a soy sauce that is properly brewed. And then I use a little bit of just some dark muscovado sugar, just a touch. Okay, then I think as you can see now, that is getting really sort of enriched. You know, as all that sort of just caramelizes and melts together. On a very technical level, what's happening here is what you in culinary language call the Maillard reactions. So basically, it's when you toast a piece of bread, it starts from golden to sort of go through different stages until it carbonizes entirely. So what's happening here is that caramelization, the Maillard reactions are taking place, and basically chemically changing into different flavor molecules. So that's good to know as well. Again, coming back to these principles that are so fundamental, you know, and if you don't understand that, then you can always say, okay, how much, you know, how deep do I want it, you know, and then I can take my onions or whatever I use for my flavor base more or less far to a darker or less dark stage. If whatever I'm saying doesn't make any sense, make sure to ask questions. I know it's a lot of information.
I have a quick question. What type of heat are you using for this stir fry?
Sorry?
What type of heat are you using? Like high, medium, low?
Oh, when you do stir fries, generally they should be just on full whack.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have enough heat here. I'm not entirely satisfied with the amount of output I get from my stove, but it's fine, you know. But just as high as it can go. Normally, the thing with a stir fry is you get everything ready, and then the actual frying process is the shortest part of making it. I guess in a way you could say that what I'm doing over here is sort of akin to more like a bracing almost, simply because there's not much output there. Now I've just chopped up the carbonero here, so that's just gonna go in there. Mind you, I'm doing a slightly more elaborate thing today. I mean, you could also make it very quick just by having a meal base and a salad, you know, or just, you know, some bread. It depends on how much time you had. I just thought it would be fun to sort of, do a little bit more. Be a little bit more festive.
We appreciate that.
So now we got this cooking over here. Now I will actually, just because I want to be able to do other things at the same time. So I put a lid on there. And now that is sort of just taking care of itself for a bit. And it gives me time to just finish my salad here. So this guy here is going to go in as well. I don't normally tend to not peel my vegetables. I just give them a nice scrub, because in that peel, usually carrot peel, for instance, you find a lot of really good nutrition, fiber, and so on, vitamins. I just taste it. It is a very sweet radish. It's delicious, very beautiful texture. Yeah, well, that's that. I think I was thinking maybe it would be nice in the stir fry. Actually, I think it's gonna go in there instead, just because it's so mild. It's almost like a sweet. And again, there is no right or wrong. You know, just have fun and experiment. And and trying
It
to think.
looks like David, who also is from the UK, also is familiar with your pulse dealer. What is it? Hod. How do you say it, David?
Hodmedots.
Hodmedods, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hodmedods. I actually know some of the guys at Hodmedods.
Okay, yeah.
And I sort of got to know them through the transition movement, which people might know in other parts of the world. It did actually start in the UK, but it's all about localization, really, and trying to sort of tackle climate change and energy and so on.
What did you call that?
The transition movement.
The transition movement. Okay. Good. I mean, I am again. I it's amazing the work that they're doing. You know, I'm an incredibly big fan of Hodmedots. Just because it is, you know, again, it seems banal, but pulses, legumes are just so important.
Yeah, I learned a lot from them, and I think anyone who's looking at trying to market produce from smallholders, from farmers in their areas, can look at the Hodmedods website, and there's lots you can gain in terms of an understanding of how you can provide a very authentic face for your products. They do lots of work on social media so that the people who are growing the pulses for them are showing their crops being grown at all the stages through the year, and then harvesting them. So people get this real sort of connection with their food and where it's grown and where it's come from. And
we were actually supposed to go and visit them the 17th of October, but then obviously because of the circumstances, that was not possible. So I spoke with his name is what is it? Come again?
Is it Josiah?
Josiah, exactly. Yes, I spoke with Josiah, and we're gonna send them some of the meal bases because I think it makes sense. You know, we use their product, and they already have an established sales channel. So I think there could be a good fit there.
Yeah.
But thank you. I will definitely look into this transition movement. How are we doing for time? Oh, we got plenty of time.
Good. Yeah, I think we have about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Maybe I genuinely don't know this. What's the difference between a pulse and a legume?
So the definition is that the legume is the plant itself, is a group of plants, and when you dry the seeds of edible legumes, it becomes a pulse.
Okay.
So it's once it's dried, basically.
I think I've been calling it incorrectly my whole life.
I have to admit, as have I, you know, until I really decided to make it all about pulses for the time being. But again, I mean, pulses.org it's such a wonderful website. Like we spoke about, Amy, it's not presented in a particularly sexy way, and I think that's kind of what we would like to do, is make pulses more sexy. But there's a wealth of information in there. It's fascinating, really fascinating, you know. And there actually, I think it was a statistic I read in there that if everybody would eat the same type of diet as they do in South India, where it's all pulse based, the planet could easily support 22.5 billion people. You know, so once we start to use pulses as our main source of protein, and we start to use farming to actually regenerate soil and you know, biodiversity rather than the other way around, you know, we can return potentially vast swaths of land to be rewilded and give it back to nature.
Mention all of the nutritional benefits that they offer, I think, too, can't be underestimated.
I mean, I think to give you a really beautiful example of this, I was so happy when I heard. So Alyssa, who is the head of food in the Bear Kitchen, an amazing lady from Canada, is 6.5 months pregnant. So she went to see her do some blood work the other day, and the midwife, or somebody who gave her the results, basically said, "Are you eating a lot of pulses? Because your iron levels are like sky high in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, she literally asked her that. And again, I mean, if you compare the pound for pound, you know, the quality nutrition you get from buying average to crappy quality meat compared with what you pay for really high quality pulses, it's no brainer. It's by far the most affordable way to get good quality protein. And again, I'm not doing this today, but you could, again, if you wanted to, you know, you can add meat for flavor, you know. So when I was doing that base with the mushrooms, that's when you could put a little bit of pork into it, for instance, or something. It's really high quality meat. And then the thing is, when you eat less of it, of course, you're also going to eat all the fat and everything. You can use all of it because that's where the flavor is, you know, when it's proper quality. You know, fat is like rubbery and nasty when it comes from, you know, a cow, for instance, that's been fed with soybeans, which is not a cow's natural diet. You know, it's not good for cows to eat that. So you have to give them lots of antibiotics just to keep them alive. So it does get slightly complex on that level, but I think the good news is that if we just, you know, primarily eat like a bear, primarily plant-based diet, you know, and use less but better quality meat flavor, then we've come a very long way. And I think it's a much more sellable proposition as well. You know, when we think about what are we going to do with the Chinese, with, you know, people in the American Midwest, everywhere. It's not like London is not how the world works. You know, it's not like, you know, there's 5% vegans everywhere. Good. So what I'm doing here is I've been massaging the salad whilst I've been talking. And again, it's basically because when you're eating like raw veg, it's a good idea to break it down a little bit. Plus, it's actually quite nice to touch your food. And then I got some what are they? Alfalfa sprouts. You know, they will go in there as well. I think a lot in terms of color as well when I cook. I don't know if you ever heard about the rainbow diet of Okinawa. So basically the dyes in, say, red cabbage, coming back to that question from before, the dyes is where the really good stuff is. So like turmeric, for instance, very strong dye, beetroot, strong dye, red pepper, and so on. So all these dyes are basically the antioxidants that we want. And other good things. So it's good to basically, just as a rule of thumb, think about eating lots of different colors, plus it looks nice. So this salad, you can see now is starting, it's not the best bowl. That's kind of the base of it here. And then I'm gonna, because we already got some wet elements and so on here, I'm just gonna dress it very lightly. In this case, I'm going to dress it with, because it's Nordic, so it's going to be dressed with some cold pressed rapeseed oil, which is also British and incredibly good for you as well. So a little bit of that, and drop of the same one. I mean, I can't get enough of it. And then let's see. Again, we're sort of in Nordic territories. I'm going to give it a little bit of mustard. There. And just a touch of salt. And now, basically, I'm just putting in some of these cooked grains. And then the rest of these grains, or what's left over here, then that tomorrow, for instance, becomes fried rice principle. You know, so you fry off the grains, add an egg in there, some more mushrooms, whatever you got lying around. So there's always a principle, there's always this rotation, you know. So instead of thinking like the way I do it is I don't think about my home cooking as a dish by dish. I think about it more as a flow. You know, so there are standards like fried grains, the fried rice principle, fried noodles, an omelette, you know, a soup base. You can always find a fundamental principle with which you can get rid of leftovers. And that's also really something I saw, because the family or the couple I stayed with in China were quite old, you know, they're early 60s. So they had seen serious like hunger, and they threw nothing out, as in nothing ever, period. And it was amazing to experience the appreciation they had for food, and also how ingrained food is as a language, you know, in the language itself, but also as a language. You know, they literally say, when you greet somebody, you say ni hao, ni chilama. So you good? Have you eaten? You ask people. That's how you say hello. Anyway, there's a bit of sidetrack. So I think I'm about done here. Then of course in true Eat Like a Bear style, always seeds and nuts. You know, really good idea. I recently read about another very interesting thing called the Blue Zone diets. So if anybody's ever heard about this, it's where they live exceptionally long and don't get lifestyle illnesses like we do, or typical Western lifestyle illnesses. There in Costa Rica, again Okinawa, I think they have some around the Mediterranean region. And there are 4 pillars in these so-called Blue Zone diets. It's pulses, whole grains, vegetables, and seeds and nuts. And when I read that, I thought that is awesome, you know, because it sounds a little bit like Eat Like a Bear. Only there's science to back it up. So then it's obviously you have to taste your food. Very important. So excuse me. So this is my one. And I'm obviously not just saying this; it is actually really spot on. I've been doing it enough now that I sort of have a really good flash. You see there's basically a lovely little grain element there. I could have had, if I'd had some fresh herbs, they would have 100% be going in there. We could, just because it's sort of like presentation stuff, you know. Just finish it off with a little bit of red chili there, and then some more seeds. And now we're talking. And then my meal base here is this is what that looks like. If I could, if I really was, I could put some more of this in there, the kale, or the cavallonero, but it's enough now.
This is the part of the digital. This is the part of the digital conference that gets quite frustrating, that we can't actually.
I'm sorry. Yeah. That is a shame. The good thing is that we actually like the principles of how to make these casseroles are available. They're not a secret, you know, because we know that it's not like we want to always cook your pulses for you. It just does take a long time, you know. But if you've got to have a Sunday or something, you know, and you remember to soak the beans the day before, it's a really good idea to make your own meal bases, you know, make a big batch of something like what I had here, and then freeze them in individual portions. It's a great thing with tomato sauce as well. Actually, there's a video I did with the principle of tomato sauce, you know, so it's always good to have little bases of things that are frozen, even just cooked pulses and cooked grains. That's why I always cook extra, because when I am cooking a grain, I might as well cook a bit extra, and then I can use that for different things in the next couple of days. Right, so without further ado, and then so here at this stage now, obviously this dish is, as it is, completely plant-based. But if I wanted to at this stage, I could give it like a little. In fact, let me show you how that works. I think that's good, just to demonstrate. So I got just a little bit of yogurt here, some good yogurt, and I just give it literally like, you know, a couple of spoonfuls, and then just that little bit of high quality dairy basically helps or transforms the whole dish, you know, if that's your thing. And if it's not, don't. Respecting individual preference, I just think is absolutely crucial to creating what we need, which is a mass movement. We don't need just like a few people being this or that, you know, we need everybody to get involved. Whether they do a little or they do a lot is not important. The important thing is that everybody understands that we do indeed have the power, and that together we can change the world by changing the way we eat. So, just one more thing to go here. No, obviously, if you were just having this yourself, I'm just separating it. You can just put it straight onto one plate. I haven't actually tasted this, but I know it's gonna be good. Maybe just a touch more soy there. All right. So basically, there you have it. So we got the grains here. Oh, sorry, the pulses, and then the whole grains with some vegetables in there as well, and some seeds and some nuts, and then just a big load of greens. I will say something which I actually think is really, really important just to get out there and to talk about, which is when you do start to eat a lot of pulses and greens in general, you know, obviously, like, don't let flatulence, I'm just saying it, don't let that put you off, because there is a sort of transition period where your body might need to adjust a little bit. But I did in the beginning, you know, there was just sometimes where I overdid a little bit, you know, but now I'm perfectly fine. My gut health has actually never been better, because pulses also contain both soluble and insoluble fibers in great quantity. The fava beans I mentioned before have a very, very thick skin, quite bitter as well, but they are just like a broom through your system. So
amazing. It looks beautiful.
I assure you, it tastes really. I'm not gonna, you know, I'll have it after we turn it off.
Thanks for not torturing us.
Yeah, no. So and obviously, you know, feel free to you know, if anybody wants to get in touch directly, you know, you can find my email is on the website, or you're welcome to share it, Amy. I'm very happy to answer any questions that come up. And also, does anybody have any questions now at this stage?
Also, I just want to say I love the philosophy of like how you approach cooking in such a creative, dynamic way. I also think really important for the whole food waste aspect of it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know.
Any tips on like what not to combine or what not to do? I feel like sometimes I make those mistakes.
Well, I mean, I think this is the thing again. So what do I do with this radish that I don't know? Well, I taste it. You know, taste it and think, you know, and as you start to, you know, I'm nowhere near people that really do cooking every single day, only for years and years and years, but you start to develop what's called a mental palate, you know, so you start to be able to think, what's going on here, you know, but I cannot stress enough that the most important thing in order to maintain the same level, get even more satisfaction from your food, whilst reducing your meat consumption, eating more plants, is to understand umami. It's not just a fancy hipster word. We got umami receptors on our tongue, and umami belongs to a group of flavor molecules called glutamates. The most famous one of these, obviously, being MSG, monosodium glutamate, which is a synthetic glutamate. You don't need that. There's umami in, I mean, where mushrooms, loads of umami, tomato contain loads of umami. I use lots of seaweed powder, soy sauce, you know, lots of fermented things contain glutamates. And it's always a good idea to think, if you're not putting meat in there, or thinking again about the meat as part of the umami base. You know, so in Japan, lots and lots and lots of different soups and dishes and so on start with dashi, which is katsuobushi, so dried fermented tuna, kombu seaweed, and shiitake mushrooms, dried shiitake mushrooms. It's basically just umami in a liquid, and you can reduce that more or less. So that's really important, I think, for cooking in general. And then always try and step back and say, okay, so, you know, I think a carbonara is a great dish, or a great example as well, because people think a carbonara is basically the thing with pancetta, but actually what a carbonara is a sauce that's made from the pasta water, where you use the pasta water and you thicken it with the egg yolk. So the egg yolk almost coagulates, and that's what thickens, and then you have a little bit of starch from the pasta water. That's what the sauce is. Then you can put courgettes in there, you can put fried mushrooms, whatever you want in there. But that's the principle of a carbonara. That's how the sauce is made. Tomato sauce, again, is a principle. And then how you then finish the pasta in the sauce, you know, so everything can be broken into its fundamental principle. And once we start to appreciate the principle, then we also understand that recipes are just variations on a fundamental principle. And once you start to grasp that, then you can really start to just, it's like, I like to say that when you learn how to do a stir fry, you're sauteing, doing a casserole, an omelette and fried rice. Then it's like learning how to play D, C, and G, and F, and A minor. You can play pretty much any pop song now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that metaphor. No, I mean, it goes really beautifully with some of the conversation we were having yesterday. Krister, I don't know if you remember, I captured this quote from you. It's so much more intelligent to export ideas. And that's what I feel like, you've taught us today, is sort of this idea of stir fry, or this idea of pulses, and how we can approach it in our different areas with different ingredients. So I love that.
Yeah. And then I think, again, think about how does a berry, primarily plants, and obviously seasonal, local, less but better quality meat, never from factory farms, so and really start to think about, getting pulses into one's diet. And I cannot stress enough like the transformative power also from an energy point of view, because when you start to eat more fiber and you start to have those slow release carbohydrates that you have in the pulses as well, with a lot of vegetables, you're going to have a lot more energy. It's like people think that they're, this is my energy level, but then you start to change your diet and you're like, whoa,
yeah,
this is possible, so it's very exciting like that as well.
I've also personally gone down this whole pulses rabbit hole, if you will, also no pun intended there. Ariana posted in the chat about Karen Hurd. Jens,
Yes,
her.
I just saw that.
I also have been following her for about a year. And so I think this whole idea of pulses and as a staple in your diet, and also as like a functional medicine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so many of these disease illnesses that we have, most of them are inflammatory, and when it comes to your gut, you have to, all health starts essentially with gut health. If that is not good, then few other things are going to be good, because it's connected so deeply with that, so, but I'm definitely checking out Karen Hurd. Fantastic.
Yeah. More on the functional medicine side, which I think is amazing. Ursula has a question. Ursula, you want to unmute? Let's see.
I mean, I can read the question here.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
If that's, unless Ursula wants to.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, my question is, how many of your ingredients have been grown in monocrops? How many how many of them are annuals? And have they been irrigated?
Yeah, but I think those are all very, very good questions. So again, coming back to the Eat Like a Bear philosophy, I always try to use vegetables that are in season, and I like to get my vegetables from ideally from a farmer's market or somewhere, so there's as much transparency around how they were grown as possible. And the reason being is that soil is not something, I mean, I can do a whole other, hour about soil health and the importance of soil health. Because when we eat things that are grown in what is technically not soil, i.e. it's not alive, and that's how monocultures, as you refer to, Ursula, basically what they end up doing is they end up being produced in what is not technically soil, because soil is alive. It has nematodes in it. It's got lots of microbes and lots of living things in it, which are very, very important for plant health, for things that are grown in that soil. So everything I have used here is, except maybe the sprouts, which I didn't have time to do myself, is from the UK, and is in season. The carrots, the red cabbage. Okay, fair enough. The chilies are not, but I don't believe. I mean, I don't think they would need to irrigate leeks and carrots and cabbages and so on. The sprouts, possibly yes, and obviously the answer to that would be it's a good idea to sprout your own pulses as well. So does that answer your question?
Well,
I just think, as you just mentioned, the soil health is very crucial to the health of the food we consume in the end. And as long as we grow things in monocrops, and I strongly believe we should also move away from annuals and use way more perennial species in our diets to also help the ecosystems to be more resilient and more have longer life cycle species in it.
Absolutely.
So we don't disturb soil too much.
I know that you know, at 42 acres they're planting hundreds of nut trees now, and it's definitely something that there is that should be a bigger part, I believe, as well of the food system, you know, as opposed to relying too heavily on things that are annuals. So what is it? Soul Food Forest Farms. Where are you located then?
Well, we're located in Switzerland, but we have farms in all over Europe and also in the tropics.
Right. Okay.
So we have quite a big group in Australia. We have a few projects in Africa. We have quite a lot here in Europe.
Well, it sounds like
and in South America.
We should have a separate conversation about that.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm going to put it on a little list here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Kay used to be a former chef and is wondering where you find the most beauty in your work.
Oh, but can we get a definition of beauty, please?
Yeah, for me, it's like when you feel that sense of union. For me, when you say like, wow, this is what I am. Like for me, when I used to be in French cuisine, I remember like just taking a duck or taking some herbs and be like, wow, I could really feel myself. And that's what for me, beauty would be defined as when you feel yourself in something else.
Right. Yes. I think for me, like overall, just slightly maybe a different definition of beauty, but for me overall, I find that the most beautiful moments are when I can see that it really clicks for people and it dawns like, oh my God, yes, we can actually change things. And as a good example of that, you know, so one of the people that work in our kitchen team, he is 22 years old now. He comes from a not so, you know, blessed, I would say, background, difficult background from Manchester. And he grew up on McCain chips and chicken nuggets. You know, now he's been working with the Bear Kitchen for about 8 months, you know, and he's just completely transformed his perspective and understanding of what food can be and what it can do for your health and for the planet and so on. And his excitement is really, to me, just so amazingly beautiful, you know, because it's you know, if I can change even one person's or the Bear Kitchen can help change even one person's heart and mind, you know, then that's a great thing. So, and then of course I take great appreciation in I think just looking at produce, you know, I just find like a thing like Romanesco, you know, I love looking at like fractals and produce and so on. So I really just love, particularly when it's still growing as well. I like to see when it's still growing. So I hope that answers your question. And thank you.
Jens, this was such a treat. Thank you so much for spending time with us and walking us through all this. I also would encourage everyone to maybe give it a try. See if you can cook up a stir fry or use some of his principles, cook up some pulses, maybe share it with the group, share it on the community, and we can all sort of exchange over some recipes that we've learned.
That'd be lovely. Also, there is, if you go onto the resources page on the website, there is actually a thing with stir fries as well, I believe, a video and a blog post about it.
Awesome. And that's in the link that we shared on the chat that you guys can access. We'll post it on the Do community platform as well.
I've really enjoyed this. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You have a lovely day.